What if I told you that banks could make more money from your retirement account than you ever will? That may sound extreme, but here's the uncomfortable truth. Hidden fees, compounding costs, and poorly explained terms quietly shift wealth away from seniors and into the hands of financial institutions. Banks thrive on the fact that most retirees never question the fine print. They know many older adults trust the system, and that trust is often exactly what costs the most. The shocking reality is that over a 20-year retirement, a senior could lose tens of thousands of dollars without ever realizing why. And the most alarming part? Banks are under no obligation to make this clear unless you press them for answers. This is why understanding retirement accounts is not optional, it's survival. The glossy brochures promising safety rarely tell the whole story. A so-called guaranteed account can feel secure, but after inflation, you may be poorer every year while thinking you're standing still. That's how banks profit, by offering products that sound protective but actually protect their bottom line. And yet, most seniors never get this warning until it's far too late. If you want your retirement money to serve you, not the banks, hit that like button now so more seniors uncover these hidden truths. Because the longer you wait to face them, the harder it becomes to escape their grip. Now, let's uncover the story of a man who discovered these truths the hard way, and how his journey can change the way you see your own retirement. Walter Briggs was the kind of man who believed in hard work, loyalty, and keeping life simple. For over 40 years, he worked as a mechanic in a small Ohio town, fixing engines, lifting heavy parts, and spending long days bent over grease-stained benches. He wasn't a high-flying executive or a Wall Street investor. He was the type of American who kept the country running, one repaired truck at a time. He lived by the values his father taught him: put in honest work, trust institutions like your bank, and save steadily so you'll always have something to lean on. By the time Walter reached his early 70s, he had done exactly that, tucked away money every month into his retirement account, followed every piece of advice his banker gave, and avoided the risky investments he was warned about. He thought he had played by the rules, and that those rules would reward him with comfort in his golden years. But reality was far different. When retirement finally came, Walter began noticing something that shook his confidence. The balance in his accounts wasn't stretching the way he expected, and the income he relied on seemed to shrink faster than he could explain. At first, he thought it was just normal life expenses piling up, but the numbers told a different story. The truth was uncomfortable. His bank had never fully explained the hidden costs and long-term erosion that came with his so-called safe accounts. What he thought was a stable, dependable cushion was in fact being eaten from the inside. Like many seniors, Walter discovered that trust in financial institutions often benefits them more than it benefits you. And here's the painful twist: Walter wasn't alone. Thousands of seniors every year wake up to the same discovery, realizing that the glossy promises and reassuring language they relied on masked a harsher reality. Banks profit whether you thrive or struggle, and the less you question, the more they win. Walter's journey through these hidden truths became a wake-up call, not just for himself, but for anyone entering retirement believing the system has their best interests at heart. And as you'll soon see, the lessons he uncovered are the same ones that could protect your future too. Truth number 1. The fee erosion. Walter Briggs spent a lifetime fixing other people's problems with a wrench and a steady hand. In retirement, he discovered he had to do the same for his money. The threat wasn't a stock market crash or a breaking headline. It was quieter: basis points, expense ratios, advisory charges, transaction costs, custodial and wrap fees, small labels that made big dents. 4 years, his statements showed tidy gains. But when Walter compared what he thought he should have earned to what he actually had, the math didn't line up. The missing piece was fees. Here is what most seniors are rarely told plainly: a 1% annual fee on a nest egg doesn't feel like much, but over time it behaves like a slow leak in a tire. Keep driving and, eventually, the rim is scraping the road. On $300,000, 1% is $3,000 in year 1. As your balance grows, the dollars skimmed away grow too, every single year, before you even touch the returns. At 1.5% or 2%, the drain compounds against you. And compounding works both ways: either it builds your wealth, or it builds the fees. For Walter, compounding had been working, for the bank. One evening, he laid out 3 years of statements across the kitchen table. With a pen in hand, he circled every deduction. A management fee here, a fund expense there, transaction costs tucked away under other. Individually, they looked harmless. Together, they explained why his safe and steady funds lagged behind simple low-cost alternatives. The worst part? None of this was disclosed in plain, front-page language. It was all buried in footnotes, links, or brochures he had never been encouraged to open. So Walter approached the issue like a mechanic troubleshooting an engine. Diagnose, replace, test. Step 1. List every fee by name and percentage. Step 2. Ask for the all-in cost, including fund expenses most providers leave off. Step 3. Demand clarity on cheaper share classes and compare providers side by side. When answers were vague, he didn't treat it as confusion, he treated it as a red flag. He shifted a portion of his savings into no-load, low-expense index funds and negotiated advisory charges on the rest. Within a year, his projected lifetime fees dropped by tens of thousands, giving him breathing space in his withdrawal plan. A quick illustration makes this clear. Imagine two identical accounts both earning 6% before fees. One charges an all-in cost of 1.8%, the other just 0.1%. Over 15 years on $250,000, the high-fee account would grow to about $463,000. The low-fee account? Roughly $591,000. That's $127,000 gone. Money that could have been spent on healthcare, travel, or simply peace of mind. Same market, different outcome, all because of costs you may never see at first glance. Practical checkpoints you can apply today. Pull your last 4 statements and highlight every line marked fee, advisory, wrap, or expense ratio. Ask your provider for a written all-in fee summary, including fund expenses and hidden charges. Compare your current funds to low-cost index alternatives and note the difference. If you use an advisor, clarify exactly what services you're paying for, planning, rebalancing, tax strategy, or simply access. Run a quick projection. How much will your current fees cost over 10 or 20 years? Walter's lesson was simple. Transparency is not a courtesy, it's your right. You worked for this money. You deserve to keep as much of it as possible, for as long as possible. Every dollar saved from fees is a dollar you can put toward living the retirement you envisioned, not funding a banker's bonus. And here's the thing, no one will ever volunteer to cut their fee. You must ask. Have you ever checked the total fees on your retirement account? Share your experience below. But fees are only the beginning. The next truth shows why so-called safety isn't always safe. Truth number 2, the illusion of safety. Walter Briggs trusted his bank when they assured him that his retirement savings were protected. Every statement reassured him with words like guaranteed, secure, and stable. And in a way, the bank was right. His balance never dipped, his accounts never showed losses, and the surface looked calm. But beneath that calm surface, inflation was at work, eroding his spending power year after year. The painful truth is that safety in name can be danger in disguise. A guaranteed account can protect the numbers on the page, while silently weakening what those numbers can buy. Walter began to notice this erosion in everyday life. A grocery trip that once cost him $80 quietly rose to over $110. The same prescriptions he had always filled now took a bigger bite out of his monthly budget. Gas, utilities, even a simple dinner out, all seemed heavier on the wallet. And yet his bank never warned him of this slow bleed. They highlighted the absence of losses but never admitted that stable accounts often guarantee a loss in purchasing power. Seniors like Walter, who take comfort in the word guaranteed, often discover too late that it guarantees decline, not protection. Consider a simple example. If your account earns 2% interest but inflation runs at 4%, your real return is negative 2%. That means every year your savings quietly buys less. Over a decade, this effect compounds dramatically. What cost $1,000 at the start could cost $1,480 or more later, while your account lags behind. It feels safe because the balance doesn't shrink, but in reality, you're losing ground. The cruel irony is that many seniors cling to safety for peace of mind, only to find that safety itself can be the slowest road to insecurity. Walter's turning point came when he compared his bank's guaranteed certificate of deposit to the rising cost of living. The numbers didn't add up. He realized that by locking his funds into these accounts, he was guaranteeing not security, but a slow decline. This was not the retirement he had worked decades to build. And so, like a mechanic diagnosing a failing engine, Walter began looking for practical fixes. The solution he found was balance. Safety still had a place, emergency funds, short-term needs, and peace of mind. But beyond that, he discovered options that fought inflation rather than surrendered to it. Treasury inflation-protected securities, TIPS, became one of his tools, designed to rise with the cost of living. He also explored conservative, diversified funds that offered steady growth without reckless risk. These were not gambles, they were safeguards. They gave him the confidence that his savings could breathe, stretch, and grow alongside his expenses. This is the lesson for every retiree. Safety is important, but it must be paired with protection against inflation. A plan built only on guarantees is like a house with strong walls but no roof. It looks solid until the rain comes. The real safety is not the illusion of a frozen number on your account statement, but the ability of that number to hold its value over time. Walter learned that ignoring inflation is not caution, it is surrender. Would you rather choose full safety with less growth, or a balance of safety and steady income? Tell us below. As for Walter, this revelation was only the beginning, because the next truth challenged everything he thought he knew about retirement age. Truth number 3, the retirement age myth. Walter Briggs had always assumed the finish line was age 70. That was the number repeated by neighbors, co-workers, and even his banker. Work as long as you can, they said, because that's the only way you'll make it. It sounded practical, even safe, but Walter later realized this advice was more myth than fact. The truth is that retirement age is not a fixed wall, it's a flexible decision that depends on planning, not guesswork. And clinging to the idea that you must push until 70 can actually rob you of the very years you hope to enjoy. Walter's wake-up call came when he attended a local seminar on Social Security. There, for the first time, he saw side-by-side comparisons of what he could expect if he filed at 62, 67, or 70. The numbers shocked him. At 62, he would receive smaller checks, but over more years. At 70, he would receive larger checks, but the break-even point, the age when the total caught up, was late in life. If his health didn't cooperate, he could lose out entirely by waiting. The myth was that later always meant better, but the math told a different story. For Walter, the calculations brought clarity. He ran projections with a counselor who showed him how retiring at 66 with partial benefits, combined with modest withdrawals from his savings, could sustain him comfortably. This plan gave him freedom 4 years earlier than he thought possible. He didn't need to wait for a magic birthday. He needed to match his strategy to his reality. This was the moment he realized that retirement planning was not just about money, it was about time, health, and quality of life. The dangerous part of the age myth is how strongly it is tied to fear. Seniors are told they will run out of money unless they wait. Banks benefit when clients keep accounts longer, collecting fees year after year. Employers sometimes encourage older workers to stay because experience is valuable. But what rarely gets said is that earlier retirement with careful planning can often deliver more joy, more energy, and more years of health to spend with family. The myth of 70 as a rule is not protection, it is postponement disguised as wisdom. Walter began to imagine what those years could mean. More weekends fishing with his grandson, more evenings sitting on the porch with his wife, more chances to travel while his knees were still strong. These were not luxuries. They were the real currency of retirement. He realized that every year spent waiting out of fear was a year he could never get back. For him, retiring at 66 instead of 70 meant nearly 1,500 extra days of freedom, days that mattered more than the size of any single Social Security check. Walter's story highlights the importance of running break-even calculations. These tools show how long it takes for waiting to pay off, and they help seniors decide whether earlier, smaller checks or later, bigger checks make sense. Add in other factors, spouse benefits, health conditions, lifestyle goals, and the right age looks different for everyone. There is no universal answer, only personal math. And when Walter saw his personal numbers, he gained something money alone could not buy: certainty. The lesson is clear. Don't accept retirement age as a rumor or a rule passed down casually. Test it for yourself. Use calculators, speak with advisors, and compare scenarios. Knowledge turns the age myth into a choice instead of a chain. Walter discovered he could free himself earlier than expected, and in doing so, he reclaimed years that might otherwise have been lost to exhaustion at work. Would you prefer retiring earlier with less, or later with more? Share your choice. For Walter, breaking free from the myth of age 70 was liberating. But what he discovered next was a truth that hits families the hardest. Truth number 4. The inheritance barrier. Walter Briggs thought he had covered every angle of retirement planning until tragedy struck closer to home. His cousin, who had also worked tirelessly for decades, passed away suddenly. The family expected that his retirement savings would flow smoothly to his wife and children. Instead, they were thrown into a bureaucratic nightmare. Because his cousin hadn't updated his beneficiary forms, the funds were locked in probate court. Months turned into years as lawyers and paperwork consumed time, money, and peace of mind. The most shocking part was that the bank could have reminded him with a simple notice, but silence is easier and often more profitable. For Walter, watching his cousin's family struggle was a wake-up call. The savings that had been meant to provide stability ended up frozen in legal battles. Bills went unpaid, assets were delayed, and stress grew heavier with every passing week. What was supposed to be a legacy of comfort turned into a burden of confusion. Walter realized this was not a rare story. It was a common trap waiting for any retiree who overlooked one simple but vital detail. The truth is that failing to update beneficiary designations can undo decades of planning. Even the most carefully balanced accounts, diversified portfolios, or tax strategies collapse if the money cannot reach the people it was meant for. Probate is not just slow, it is costly. Court fees, attorney expenses, and delays drain value that should stay in the family. And while institutions have procedures to handle these cases, those procedures protect the bank, not the heirs. Walter took immediate action. He reviewed every retirement account, insurance policy, and investment he owned. He updated beneficiaries, double-checking that names were correct and aligned with his wishes. He didn't stop there. He consulted an estate planner and learned about living trusts, a tool that allowed assets to bypass probate entirely. He also sat down with his children to clearly explain where documents were stored and how to access them. For Walter, this wasn't just about money, it was about dignity, clarity, and leaving a legacy of order instead of chaos. Imagine the difference between two families. In one, beneficiary forms are updated, trusts are in place, and heirs know exactly what to do. The transition is smooth, the money arrives quickly, and grief is not worsened by financial battles. In the other, forms are outdated, accounts are locked, and survivors are forced into years of legal wrangling. The cost isn't only financial, it's emotional. Families fracture under the weight of stress that could have been avoided with a few hours of preparation. Walter's experience highlights a powerful lesson: inheritance is not automatic. It must be managed with as much care as saving and investing. Updating beneficiary forms should be a regular habit, not a one-time task. Creating a living trust can be the difference between control and confusion. And communication with heirs is as important as the paperwork itself. Without it, even well-meaning plans can dissolve into conflict. When was the last time you updated your beneficiary forms? Drop done if you've done it recently. If not, consider Walter's story a reminder that waiting is the most dangerous choice. And finally, the most expensive truth of them all. Truth number 5, the silent tax burden. Walter Briggs thought the hardest part of retirement planning was saving enough. He spent decades setting money aside, carefully building his nest egg, and believed the rest would take care of itself. What he didn't expect was that the government would have its own plans for his money. When he began withdrawing from his retirement accounts, Walter was stunned to learn that each dollar counted as ordinary income. That meant higher tax bills and, worse, the risk of being pushed into a bracket he had never imagined reaching. The cruel twist was that he wasn't spending extravagantly, just accessing the money he had already saved. The shock deepened when required minimum distributions, or RMDs, came into play. At 73, Walter was legally required to take money out of his tax-deferred accounts, whether he needed it or not. The silent trap was that his account, which had grown quietly for decades, became a ticking tax time bomb. Every forced withdrawal increased his taxable income, which in turn affected how much of his Social Security was taxed and even raised his Medicare premiums. What looked like a solid retirement plan suddenly carried hidden costs that no banker had ever explained. Walter realized this wasn't negligence, it was design. Financial institutions rarely highlight the tax traps because taxes don't hurt them, they hurt the retiree. And the government depends on seniors following the rules without asking questions. For Walter, the betrayal was discovering that decades of discipline could unravel simply because no one warned him about the impact of taxation. It felt like a penalty for doing the right thing. But Walter did not stay helpless. He learned that planning could soften the blow. The first step was understanding Roth conversions. By gradually moving portions of his tax-deferred savings into Roth accounts during lower income years, he could pay taxes upfront at a controlled rate and avoid heavy burdens later. The second step was timing his withdrawals strategically, taking modest amounts before RMDs began, reducing the pile that would eventually be forced out all at once. Finally, he sought advice from a tax-savvy professional who showed him how to coordinate distributions with Social Security and other income sources. With these changes, Walter began to control his tax story instead of letting the rules control him. Imagine two retirees with identical savings. One ignores planning and waits until RMDs force distributions, pushing her into a high tax bracket and shrinking her Medicare subsidies. The other starts withdrawals earlier, converts portions to Roth, and spreads the impact. After 10 years, the difference could be tens of thousands of dollars, money that one enjoys freely while the other loses to taxes. The silent burden is not just about income, it ripples through healthcare costs, estate planning, and even what you can leave behind for family. Walter's journey is a warning and a lesson. Retirement planning doesn't end when you stop working, it evolves. The choices you make about when and how to take income are as critical as the saving itself. Ignoring taxes is not safety, it is surrendering control. For Walter, reclaiming that control meant fewer surprises, steadier income, and the dignity of using his savings on his terms. Did your bank ever explain tax traps to you? Yes or no, leave your answer below. Because for Walter, no one ever did, and the silence nearly cost him more than he could afford. Here's how Walter's retirement transformed once he faced these truths head-on. Walter Briggs had reached a breaking point. 4 years, he had trusted the polished voices of bankers, the comforting words of advertisements, and the myth that the system was built to protect him. What he learned instead was that hidden fees chipped away at his savings, inflation gnawed at his purchasing power, outdated rules about retirement age kept him chained to work longer than necessary, inheritance planning was riddled with traps, and taxes loomed like a shadow waiting to claim a portion of everything he had built. These were not minor inconveniences. They were the silent forces shaping his retirement, forces that had been quietly tilting the scales in favor of banks, institutions, and government coffers while leaving him exposed. The hardest truth Walter faced was that retirement is not automatically designed to reward the saver, it is designed to serve the system. But Walter did something many seniors never do, he stopped being passive. He began to ask questions, demand clarity, and act with intention. He reduced the unnecessary fees that had siphoned money from his accounts for decades, shifting into lower-cost investments that respected his hard work. He adjusted his mix of safe and growth-focused assets, ensuring that inflation would not erode his security while still protecting his base. He updated his beneficiaries, eliminating the risk of probate chaos and guaranteeing that his wife and children would not suffer unnecessary delays. Most importantly, he addressed the silent tax burden, making strategic withdrawals, considering Roth conversions, and coordinating his distributions so that his retirement income was efficient, predictable, and under his control. This transformation was not about wealth alone, it was about dignity and freedom. Walter went from feeling trapped by a system he thought was unshakable to steering his own course. He realized that knowledge was his greatest defense. By uncovering the truths banks rarely share, he reclaimed power over decisions that had once been dictated to him. The real freedom of retirement isn't measured by the size of an account, It's measured by the control you have over how that account serves your life. And here lies the key takeaway. Banks don't design your retirement, you do. The glossy brochures and reassuring slogans are meant to keep you compliant, not empowered. But when you know the truths, you are no longer an easy target for hidden fees, shrinking safety nets, or tax surprises. You become the architect of your future, shaping your golden years into what you want them to be. The first step to protecting your freedom is awareness, and the second is action. Walter's story proves that both are within reach for every senior willing to look closer. Retirement freedom isn't about luck, it's about knowledge, action, and confidence. Luck may have carried you through a career or given you a few windfalls along the way, but lasting freedom comes only when you decide to take control. The good news is that it is never too late. Whether you are 60, 70, or even 80, the truths revealed in Walter's journey can still make a difference in how you live, how you spend, and how you leave a legacy. If this opened your eyes, hit like right now. Share it with a friend over 60 who needs to hear it, someone who deserves to uncover these truths before it is too late. And most importantly, subscribe to Retirement Freedom and Wealth Advice for Elderly, because your golden years should truly be golden, and no bank, tax code, or hidden trap should ever steal that from you. Walter's journey was a warning, but it was also a map. Now the map is in your hands. What you do with it will define your freedom.